Hi everyone, it's Molly here and welcome back to our virtual neurodiversity conference, Empowering Neurodiverse Children to Shine. Next up, we've got Steve Howell, the lead practitioner for Witherslack Group, who will be presenting PBS, Putting Our Children at the Centre. As Sophie said at the beginning, this presentation is being recorded, so if you miss anything or if you're having any technical issues, we'll email out a link after the event so you can watch this in your own time. We'll also hold a Q&A at the end of the session, so please submit any questions you've got via the control panel at the side of your screen. And thank you again for joining us, and I'll hand over to you now, Stephen.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, everyone. Good morning to you all. Really excited to be back presenting at one of these conferences. I want to thank the organisers for allowing me to spend the next hour or so with you guys. So I think before we get started in terms of what we're going to look at, which will be positive behaviour support, I want to give a little bit of a background in my career so far. So my initial kind of start out point was in learning disability nursing. So I qualified back in 2012, and I spent the first 5 years of my career kind of working with adults with learning disabilities, and then kind of progressed and became really interested in how we can support people who have these behaviours of concern in a more positive way, a way which improves the life of the people that we look after. So I did a little bit of further education in that, and I've gradually worked my way and have started at the Witherslack Group back in 2019. So I'm currently a lead practitioner, and what that basically means is we go around and we support schools and children's homes with different things, really. So I'm part of the Safeguarding Behaviour and Inclusion team, so we look at how we can support our children in a really positive way, which will improve their quality of life, finding different strategies that will help support them in a more positive way. So that's a little bit about me. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to look at positive behaviour support, what it is. We're also going to dispel some of the myths around PBS, because I think it's become sort of a buzzword within various sectors without actually understanding what it means, and with that comes some myths that we might hear in different places, and I just want to kind of look at some of them and put them to bed, if you like. And then once we've looked at what PBS actually is fundamentally, we'll then look at the capable environments and what we can do as carers to support our young people, thinking about what's around them at the time, the way that we interact with them, and how we can support them to have a life in which they can thrive. And then hopefully at the end we'll get some opportunity for some questions and answers. So just send them through as the presentation comes along, and we'll try and answer what we can later on. So positive behaviour support, you might have heard of it. It often gets shortened to PBS. Ultimately, there's four parts of it, four components of PBS, which we're going to look at individually as we move forward. We're going to look at promoting quality of life and how we can promote quality of life. It's very much values led. People who work with the children that we do need to have a good value basis in terms of, because we are working and we are supporting children who are quite complex and have often at times been through a life which has been difficult for them. So we need to have compassion for that, and we need to work with them in a way in which the values are at the centre. We need to think about the systems that we're putting in place and how we can make them work for the child. And then ultimately as well, we need to understand what behaviour means and how we can meet their needs through the support that we put in place for them. So they're the 4 things that we're going to look at as we move forward, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of narrow it down and make it a little bit easier to understand. So the first thing that I wanted to do, and I mentioned it at the beginning, was I want to dispel some of the myths that we often come across. You might have seen some of these or come across some of these myths as we've as you've been speaking to people. So PBS is not letting our children get away with the behaviours, in particular the behaviours that of concern that we see. I think what has happened in some places is that because of their own individual needs, we need to allow them or not challenge that behaviour, because it's seen as what can be quite punitive. Well, when actually what our children need is they need to feel safe, they need to feel contained, and within that they need to understand that there are boundaries and expectations. And if we allow those boundaries to extend and become bigger, then that element of feeling safe it wanes and it gets smaller. So we need to think about how we're going to challenge the behaviours, as opposed to letting them get away with the behaviours that we see. More and more people are coming along saying that PBS is to be used by specialists who have degrees or masters, when actually as we move forward you'll see that actually it's just a way of living and supporting the young people that we care for. It's just a way of being. It's not a special tool, and I've mentioned that in the next part. It's not a tool which we get out of a toolbox when we see a behaviour that we feel is concerning or is challenging. It's a way of being. It's how we support our children all the time, whether we see the behaviour or not. We're putting things in place proactively to support them and make sure that we can give them the life that we feel they deserve. So following on from that, it's not about eliminating behaviour, and that's the sole purpose of PBS. PBS is not about seeing your child punching and doing everything we can to stop them punching. And we need to understand that there's a reason for that. There's for that behaviour, and we'll come on to that in a bit. It's not about stopping that behaviour. Actually, it's about everything else that we do, and then hopefully we should see a reduction in that behaviour. So the first thing that we saw in this little diagram that we've got is promoting quality of life, and this is the overall aim of positive behaviour support. It's to think about how we can improve the quality of life, make the life better for the people that we support. Now, quality of life is quite subjective. For one person, it might be improving quality of life is making our young person step through the door of a school for the first time. That's amazing. That's allowing them to enter in an environment where they can learn and they can engage in meaningful activities. For some people, it might be doing what we can to get them out and about, socializing with peers and in different environments. So quality of life is subjective. It's not a be all and end all, but ultimately we should know the children that we're caring for, and we should know what we need to put in place to make their life better. So what this does is it places an obligation on us as carers to achieve a better life for our children. It's on us. It's not on our young person to change and suddenly want to go and spend time with friends in the local park. It's not on the children to suddenly decide, oh, I want to learn how to get on a bus into town. Actually, what we need to do is we need to put things in place for our young people to achieve that outcome, thus improving their quality of life. What we will see, rather than focusing on reducing and eliminating the behaviours, we should see that improving quality of life for our young people will naturally result in a reduction of the behaviours that we see, behaviours that can be challenging. And it's very easy to focus on those behaviours, but as we move forward and we look at maybe the capable environments in a bit, you'll see that if we start putting things in place, even little things that will increase their quality of life a little bit, then we will hopefully start seeing a reduction in those challenging behaviours. So I mentioned before, the people that are caring and looking after our young people need to want to do it. PBS is very much about the heart. It's about the values that we have in working and supporting our young people. So it promotes dignity, it promotes respect, it promotes inclusion, so getting them involved in things, whether if you work in a school, adapting things within the school to make sure that it meets that young person's need. It's about diversity, and it's a life with no unnecessary restriction. So it's reducing the restrictions that we have in a safe manner, because we want our children's life to be fulfilled, and we want them to take positive risks in life. There's a focus on working in partnership with different people. I mean, you'll all, as carers and parents, you'll all have a network of people that you work with to support the young person, your child, whether that's friends, whether that's family, whether that's school, medical professionals, CAMS. It's about getting everybody involved and putting that young person at the centre of the work that we do, and making sure that we're meeting that young person's needs. And what PBS does is it advocates against aversive strategies and punishment. So we know that ultimately punishing a child for the behaviours isn't going to lead to long-term change. It might eliminate one behaviour, but they might show another behaviour because they're wanting their needs met, and that's on us as carers to understand what that need means. So punishment doesn't have long-term impact, positive impact, and it can create a lot of barriers in the work that we do. So we want to look at positive ways in which we can work with our young person. We need to think about the systems and what's going on around that young person, and ultimately having an understanding that it's not the young person that needs to change. It's our young people have different ways of communicating, different ways of seeing the world, and we've got to understand that and make adaptations around the understanding of that, as opposed to, right, we need to change that behaviour and we need to change that person so they can fit into societal norms. At the same time, and we'll come on to kind of the teaching of skills, we've got to understand that society doesn't change in the way that we need to. So we need to help our children build new skills to help them cope and tolerate with the world that's around them. But we as carers and as young people, whether we're in school or whether we're working with them at home, we need to think about the environment, what's going on around them, what can we change, and what can we do to increase the quality of life for our young person. And this next bit, kind of the understanding of behaviour and meeting needs, places an obligation on us as carers to really try and understand what the behaviour means. The behaviour isn't being displayed just because they want to display these behaviours which we find challenging. They're being displayed because they're trying to communicate something. They're trying to tell us what they need, and often what we do, we fit when we look at challenging behaviour, we fit them into 4 components of what the potential function might be. So the first one is sensory. So are they displaying these behaviours because we're not meeting their sensory needs? Whether it's a young person is hypersensitive to what's going on in the environment, whether it's the smell of things, whether it's the lighting, it's just too much. So actually what they'll do is if they are unable to tell us, you know, this room is too light, we might see various differing behaviours. Same again if a child is hyposensitive, you know, we might see behaviours like self-injurious behaviour, where actually they're meeting their sensory need. They're requiring more sensory input and stimulation, so they might self-harm to try and get that sensory feedback that they're craving. And if that is the case, then we as carers need to find different ways of supporting that and helping them to increase their sensory input through more appropriate ways. So that's sensory. We also think about escape. So one of our young people might, I don't know, as an example, might throw a chair in a classroom because they're unable to say, in this classroom I'm feeling overwhelmed. Now I might, if I throw a chair, then a member of staff might say, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to leave this classroom? Suddenly the need's being met because they're wanting to escape that environment. We've got connection seeking, so the need to connect and have that attention from a carer, whether it's positive connection or negative connection. Connection is connection, and we all crave it as human beings. We all need that connection. So the behaviours that we see might be saying, I need to connect with somebody. I need something from the people around me. And then the last one is tangible. So are they displaying these behaviours to actually gain an object or an experience? If I do this, then I'll get a cup of tea. If I do that, then I'll get my Xbox or whatever it is. So if a child is unable to communicate effectively what their needs are at that moment in time, whether it's because that they're not able to just because of their needs, or they're so anxious that the skills that they have in communicating subside, then they will use other forms of communication which often show up as the behaviours of concern. So what PBS does is it uses different ways to gather evidence to help us understand what the behaviour means. So it might be through functional assessment, which is a variety. Functional assessments are a variety of different ways to gather the information that we need to help us to hypothesize and understand what the behaviour means. So it might be through observations of the young person. It might be through just knowing the child and having discussions with other people. It might be interviewing key people. It might be speaking to the school. What are the schools seeing in when your young person goes in and spends the day there? Is there anything that we can get, any sort of evidence, any sort of information that we can get from any source that will help us understand what the behaviour is communicating? And then once we've got the hypothesis, once we feel like we understand, so let's take for example the escape. So our child is displaying this behaviour because they want to escape from this environment. It's then on us to help to teach a functionally equivalent skill which is more appropriate. So for example, instead of throwing a chair in the classroom because you want to escape, how about instead of verbally saying, I want to leave the classroom, because often that's not possible with the anxiety, how about you just have a card and you give it to your member of staff, and the red card means I want to leave the classroom. That's a functionally equivalent skill. That's teaching different skills to help meet their individual needs at the time. And then we also can think about the environment and what's going on in the environment that we can change, that we can alter to meet the need of the young person. So that takes us nicely on to capable environments. So capable environments, Peter McGill and various others have come up with this nice diagram which helps us to think about step by step what we can do to support our young people in various different ways. It's creating an environment in which we can help our children to thrive. And as you can see, that there's 12 different steps. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the first 9, because the last 3 is the obligation that's put on organisations, whether that's managers, whether that's head teachers, whatever it is, teachers. That's placed on them to ensure that things are put in place to meet the needs of the young person. So we'll look at the first 9. And if we get 1 or 2 really good for a young person, we will start seeing a reduction in behaviour, because what we'll find is that the quality of life will increase. So we'll go step by step, and we'll look at the first one, which is positive social interactions. So what this means is essentially the people that us as carers initiate positive interactions, and we have a desire to want to do that. We want to spend time and interact with our young person, but we also want to encourage positive interactions between our young person and others as well. But obviously interactions can be very different between our in the way that they communicate. So it might be that we interact by speaking, having conversation. It might be that our interaction is through signing, whether that's Makaton or sign language. It might be touch, tactile. Some of you might have come across intensive interaction, which is a method of communicating and building relationships whereby the carer and the person that we're working with find various different ways, use sensory toys to interact with each other, use vocalizations to interact with each other, and different noises can be used as a way of interacting as well. Ultimately, when it comes to social interactions, we need to interact in a way that our young person understands and is able to partake in. So it's all well and good us interacting with them by having a conversation with them, but if they don't fully understand that, then it's not positive for them. Which leads us on to the next part, which is communication. So again, the obligation is on us to understand what the best form of communication for the young person actually is. We might think it's spoken words, but actually what it could be is that when a child becomes more anxious, that actually spoken words become meaningless, because it's in one ear out the other, and they can't actually take in the information and comprehend what is being said. So it might be that we need to think about if one of our children is becoming a little bit more dysregulated, do we need to reduce the amount of words that we're using? Do we need to think about how we're communicating with them? So it might be their name and then the instruction, but very simply, as opposed to what would be seen as a normal conversation. Do we need to think about visual support for our young people? Do we need to think about signs and symbols? Do our children understand what's coming next. How are we communicating that we're moving from this activity to the next activity? Maybe it's through the use of a now and next board. Maybe it is through the use of just speaking and giving instruction. And then I've mentioned there Makaton sign language. We find that often that works really well. If your child has learned it, kind of very simple visual signs, visual body language to help them. So that's about us communicating and how we communicate with the young person, but it's also a requirement that us as carers understand what the young person's body language is saying, what their spoken word is saying, what their gestures are. Are we seeing signs that our young person is becoming more dysregulated, for example? It might be pacing, it might be repeated kind of vocalizations, it might be mimicking things. Do we understand the communication that is being presented back to us? And again, that's on us as carers to try and understand that. So we as carers need to encourage and tailor our support to allow the young person to engage in various different things. So are we giving the opportunity to go into the community and take part in various different leisure activities? Would the person that we're supporting like to go and spend time in a youth club and interact with peers of similar ability or understanding or interests? Are we finding those opportunities for them? School activities, again, this is on us as carers to talk to the schools and liaise with the schools around how we tailor our support within the schools so they can thrive in there. Do they have opportunities to leave the classroom when they're becoming a little bit more anxious? Do the staff know their preferred way of communicating? What can the school do to change the ways that they work so they're able to get the young person engaged and feel like they're part of that school day? Thinking about domestic activities, and this comes back to the teaching of new skills as well. Thinking about chores and ways in which we can build skills up for different independent living and making it feel like it's meaningful for them. I mean, a lot of our children, we know children don't necessarily like the idea of doing chores, but how can we get them engaged in various different activities that, one, make it feel like they're doing something meaningful, and two, when they move on into adulthood, do they have the skills where they can thrive in adulthood as well? And as part of the meaningful activities, we need to seek opportunity for social interactions. I mentioned about going into the community and spending time with friends, but we want to encourage our children to have those interactions that are positive and meaningful and give purpose. So it's not a case of coming home and there's nothing to do. What other opportunities can we find? And it might be that our young person is too anxious to do that. You know, it's all well and good saying, oh, we can get them into a group in the community, but actually if they're too anxious, then what can we do as carers to build that up and build confidence to engage in those sort of activities? Predictable environments are really important for children to feel safe and contained. So we need to have environments and ways of working which is predictable. So if I display this behaviour, I know what reaction I'm going to get. If I do this, then I know what's going to happen. Carers are consistent in their approach to the support and care that they give. So if there's more than one person, we need to be giving similar messages, similar ways of supporting, consistent in the sense that I understand that the routine in the morning needs to be up, shower, breakfast, school, as opposed to changing that up because it meets our needs. If that works for the young person, then that's what we do. Carers ensure that the young person know what is going to happen in a way that they understand. Again, we think we can ourselves, we can see that it's quite easy to go from A to B in our routine and know what's coming next. But if one of our young people is anxious about what's going on, that ability to understand rationally what is happening next can subside. So actually what it might be is that transition, we really need to think about how we do it. We need to think about whether visual aids might support that. So it might be that, right, you've got tea now, and then you've got playtime, and then bath at night time. So that especially when they're engaged in an activity that they really enjoy, for example, playing a game before going to bath, how do we move from that to the next? How can we make that predictable? So it might be that it's visual aids and a timer to help support them, to help it make it clear that that's when we move on to the next step, so they can prepare for that. And we as carers and schools, whichever environment that we work in, need to ensure that the boundaries and expectations that we have are made very clear. What this will do is this will provide safety and containment, and this is absolutely fundamental if we're going to make it to create a life where our child can thrive. Before they thrive, they need to feel safe and contained, and they need to understand what the expectations are. So we need to think about how we can actively support to build and maintain relationships. Relationships are at the forefront of ensuring a child is safe. If a strong relationship is built with an adult, then that generally means that they feel safe around that person, which allows us then to put things in place to help increase quality of life. So we need to actively build those relationships and encourage other people to build relationships with them, whether that's other children, whether that's staff at school, whether that's friends and family. We need to do what we can to help build and maintain healthy relationships. We need to think about how we can offer opportunities for developing new relationships as well. Very easy to kind of create a small group of people who know the young person really well, which is brilliant, and that's not a wrong thing. But how do we expand their circle of friendship and relationship so we can offer other opportunities outside of that small close circle of friends and family? And what that does is that gears them up for adult life as well, where they'll come into contact with other people. So opportunities for choice and giving choice is a really integral part of ensuring that we can improve the quality of life of the young person. If they feel like they've got some choice and some control of a situation, their own feelings are going to be of self-esteem and independence are going to increase, thus again improving quality of life and reducing those behaviours of concern. So where possible, and I say where possible because I'll come on to it, safety in a minute, but where possible, we want to give our young person and get them involved in choices that will affect their day-to-day life. You know, simple things like different activities in the afternoon, when going out and about, where would you like to go? What breakfast cereal would you like? What would you like for tea? But when it comes to choice, we also need to balance the fact that we need to safeguard and make sure that risk is reduced. So we know that some of our children might make choices that actually we know aren't going to be helpful for them because it places them at harm, it places other people at harm. So a choice in that situation isn't the best thing to do, and actually we need to, and this is where the boundaries and expectations come in, we need to ensure that we take control of that situation. We decide when they have choice in certain things, not everything. If risk is going to increase because of a choice that they make, and when I say risk, I mean they're going to get hurt or you're going to get hurt, then that choice needs to be taken away from them. We need to, again, increase independence, and we've spoken about independence a little bit with regards to how we can improve it. But when a child can feel more independent, then self-esteem increases, and their feeling of I'm in a good place will increase as well. You know, improving that quality of life. So how can we do it? How can we increase independence? Well, we can think about how we can teach new skills. What skills can we teach? Can it be something like, right, they're old enough to try a little bit of independent travel. So that might be, you know, we initially go on the bus with them and we teach them what the route is from here to town or here to their friends or another member of your family. Put down there again the skills development stuff, cooking. A lot of our children really enjoy cooking and baking, and that's really good stuff, because what that does is, again, that increases their independent skills for later life. Budgeting as they get a bit older, thinking about money and how to use money appropriately. And as part of independence, it's about finding different experiences for the young person. And we've spoken about going out into the community, but other things, what can we do in school to increase independence? Different experiences, going on trips. All of these things, again, will improve quality of life. So health is really key, and we need to ensure that the health and the personal needs of our children are met. We need to be attentive to that. We need to understand, again, going back, this links with the communication stuff. We need to understand if our child can't communicate that they're in pain or they're in discomfort, that we try and we understand how they communicate that. Is it through hitting the head or punching their ear because they've got earache? And if we see, as carers, if we see an increase in frequency or intensity of the behaviours that are concerning, whether that's self-injurious behaviour, whether that's what we see as aggressive behaviour towards others, and it's sort of come out of the blue, or where this has come from, and they can't communicate pain or discomfort, medical needs need to be ruled out first. You know, it's all well and good putting in a fantastic plan to increase quality of life, which includes meeting sensory needs with a sensory room, but that's not going to, if they've got an abscess, that's not going to meet the need. So if like I say, if there's an increase in frequency or intensity of these behaviours, think about a checkup. Think about what we can do to ensure that they're not in pain or discomfort. And then finally, the final part of the capable environments that we're going to look at is actually the environment itself. Do we need to make appropriate alterations and changes to meet their needs, to meet their sensory needs? You know, we spoke about being hypo and hypersensitive. Is there something within the environment that is causing distress? You know, I've lighting, the temperature of the room, the noise levels that are going around. So if it's too noisy, what adaptations can we make to reduce those noise levels? So it might be ear defenders, or it might be opportunity to spend time in a quiet place. And then thinking about the space, the clutter, what's around to help a child feel safe. And I sort of touched on this before. You know, there will be challenges, there will be things that our young people come up against out in the community, out in school, wherever it is, that we can't change. You know, so we can't always change how many people are going to be at the shopping centre. So we need to think about different ways that we can teach coping skills and coping mechanisms for our young people, and it might be through the use of ear defenders because it's too noisy. It might be, right, we're going shopping and these are the things that we need, so, and it's done in a visual way, so they can focus on that, get what they need done, and then move forward. So we really do need to think about the environment, the bedrooms, the lounge, the dining, whatever it is. Think about what their needs, what their behaviour is communicating, and how we can make those alterations. So finally, some key points to take away, and I've mentioned these throughout the course of the presentation, but we need to think about safety and containment, because this is absolutely paramount to ensure that we give the child the opportunities to thrive. Our children are going to remain in a place of constant distress and anxiety if they don't feel safe in that environment. And often that distress and anxiety is shown in behaviours that we do find challenging. So, I mean, we've spoken about boundaries and clear, defined boundaries are really important in ensuring that a child feels safe and contained. And they might fight back against those boundaries. And the more that we push back with them, the more unsafe they're going to feel within that. So, I mean, I don't know how many times I've mentioned quality of life, but that's so key in the work that we do. We're not thinking about the behaviour and only the behaviour. We're thinking about all of the other strands that we can pull together to improve the quality of life, and we will see reduction in those behaviours. And then finally, getting one capable environment done well is going to start improving quality of life. So I've gone through 9 there, and that might seem overwhelming in its completeness. But if we take one of those, so if we take communication and we really focus on making sure that we're able to communicate appropriately with the young person in a way that they understand, we will start seeing improvements in quality of life. So if we can get that done well, we can then move on to the next one. And if we start bit by bit, piece by piece, stacking those different capable environments on top of each other, we will see a massive increase in quality of life and also a reduction in the behaviours of concern. Thank you very much for listening.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen. We've actually had loads of questions flying in, so it was a very engaging presentation by the looks of it. So first question is, how do you support a child who masks and has anxiety that prevents them from asking for help or displays disruptive behaviour?
So I'm going to assume, the masking takes place in school, maybe, because what masking is generally creating a persona whereby they fit in, but actually a lot of it is around anxiety, and we see a lot of the time that our children mask within a school environment because they feel like they need to fit in, but when they go home, these anxieties then pour out, and it comes back to those capable environments, and it comes back to working with key people to ensure that we help that young person to feel safe. So how do we work? We need the people that are working with that person who masks need to make sure that they know the young person, know their communication, liaise with parents, understand how their morning has been, how their evening has been, and remain in that communication. It's really difficult. It's really difficult when it comes to masking, because you just don't know when that mask is gonna slip, in a sense. So we need to create an environment where we can provide opportunities to not need to use that mask, because it's a safety mechanism. It's a way of remaining safe. So we need to, going back to the value stuff, we need to be inclusive and understand that that's them, that's who they are, and create an environment where they feel valued within it.
Yeah, brilliant answer. Thanks, Stephen. The next one is on developing relationships. This is something that I have always struggled with ADHD as such, so I don't know how to model or support this with my son. Can you offer some practical strategies or tips for making the step from meeting new people to actually developing into a friendship?
Ooh. So you're right in the sense that the first step is meeting people, and then what friendship is it's then moving on to something a little bit more intimate, and that comes through kind of similar interests. It comes through the way that we are open with each other, the way that we communicate with each other. So what I would say is the first step is meeting new people and being open to meeting new people. So that's really positive in itself, and it's giving that opportunity to develop the friendships. Friendships are two-way, so it's really hard to actually give a tip on how we make friends. But what I would say is the fact that you're going out and that you're interacting and having those positive interactions is a really good first step for moving on into that more intimate friendships. And don't try and force a friendship. That will come naturally if both people want it. But like I say, the first part, which is going and putting yourself out there and spending time with other people, is a really positive step.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. The next one is, how do I address a behaviour where the child is not expressive? He cannot express what's going on in his mind or what's bugging him. There's no expression, there's just no expression at all from his side. Do you have any tips?
So again, that goes back when we were speaking about capable environments, that goes back to the communication part. So they might not be expressive in body language or verbal, but if clearly you understand that there is something bugging him, as you said. So how do we find different ways of allowing him to communicate that? So it might be through the use of talking mats, which is different kind of visual aids whereby a child is able to express through visuals and words what's going on. Another thing to look at is zones of regulation. So zones of regulation are widely used, and it has different emojis, and it can be adapted to meet the needs of the young person, but that's just a way of our young people expressing how they're feeling at that moment in time. So it might be that they're able to express through pointing at a photo that they're feeling angry, or it might be that they're able to point at a photo that they're feeling sad. And even just getting that is a real positive first step in understanding, right, what do we need to do when our son or daughter is saying, I feel angry, right, what are we going to do to help them in that? So it might be through the use of talking mats, visual aids, whatever it is.
That's great, thank you. And the next one is, my son is almost 10 and has a diagnosis of ADHD. He often is very verbal, using language he knows that he shouldn't use. He screams, he's rude, answers back, or hurts other people. It is very much seeking attention or reaction. Have you got any tips for helping him in a positive way?
So I think we need to flip that kind of question on its head, I think. So if we're saying that our son is doing this for attention or connection, then how do we provide that attention or connection in a way whereby they don't need to display those behaviours? So I mentioned before about functionally equivalent skills. What can we provide from a connection perspective to make it so they don't need to do that? So it might be that at set times, and this is very generic in what I'm about to say, but it might be that when they're at home from school, that at set times you go and do an activity with your son, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's half an hour, whatever it is, but at set times, and they know when that's going to be. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't give that's the only time we give connection, but I think we've got to understand that if they're seeking connection, then that's a need. It's very, I often kind of hear, oh, they're just doing it for attention. Yeah, and that's important to them. So how can we provide that in a more positive way? And taking away the who are they wanting connection with? Thinking about going out and meeting new people and new friends and kind of building those relationships. So it's almost flipping it on its head from what do I do if they are displaying this behaviour, to what can I do to prevent this behaviour from occurring?
Brilliant, thank you. And this next question we've had come up quite a few times. It's, how can I encourage my 4-year-old daughter to engage in learning when I cannot have a two-way conversation with her? If she doesn't want to do something, it's just like she shuts down and will not listen.
Okay, so it's like a demand avoidance kind of thing, maybe. I think we've got to understand, with the children that we work with, it can take time. We want things often to move at a pace where we feel comfortable, but with our children, it doesn't happen like that, and that's okay. So I would say, keep doing what you're doing with regards to trying to get her to engage, but maybe do it at a slower pace. So slow things down a little bit. If we're wanting this whole task completed, it might be that we just we just encourage them to complete just a little part of the task, and kind of put things in place to incentivize what that looks like. Yeah, it's also how we're communicating it as well. If it is a demand avoidance kind of thing, maybe we need to reframe it and rephrase it as a rather than can you do this, I don't know, and this might be very simplistic, rather than can you do this, it might be I'd really like it if you did this with me, and just little things like that, because often we do find that our children shut down when a demand's placed on them, because that can be quite anxiety provoking.
Yeah, great, thank you. And the next question is, my 13-year-old has had lots of support in junior school, etc. But as he went to high school, it fell away. He's tried to cope without things like visual, so he felt more normal. Is there any harm going back to these sorts of things? It's sometimes being described as a retrograde step to me. Thank you.
So is there any harm in going back to visual aids? I think is the question that was asked, and absolutely not. Absolutely not. If that is meeting a need for your son, or it has met a need for your son, then I would absolutely think about going back to that. And that might take a bit of time because you know, if he's going to high school and he's trying to fit in with everybody around him, that there might be a reluctance to do that. But that's a really key part of allowing him to communicate and us understanding what he's communicating. So if visual aids were a really key part of his progress in school and that slipped away, that would definitely be the first place that I look at, is how do we reintroduce visual aids, but how do we reintroduce it in a way where he feels comfortable at the same time, and it's not going to be a barrier. And there are different ways, and work with the school as well on how that can take place within the school.
Brilliant, thank you. This one's quite a long one, but so as a neurodivergent person myself who can be very easily triggered, do you have any advice on how to manage situations when our neurodivergent son doesn't respect boundaries or give me or my husband space when we need it? For example, if our son has a big emotional meltdown and we have tried to help and support, but he's been aggressive and sometimes physical, we've asked for a minute or two to calm and regulate ourselves, but he won't, and he keeps following us and prodding us. It can be very difficult and reignite the feelings of overwhelm between all of us. Do you have any advice to help this?
That's so going back to that, boundaries were mentioned, and I think it's really difficult when you're in it and you're trying to enforce boundaries, and that's becoming more difficult because you're just looking for peace or a quick end to what's going on at that moment in time. I think the first thing that I would say is those boundaries, you need to keep watertight with them, because that your son will learn to understand what the boundaries and expectations are at that moment in time. It might take time and it might be difficult initially, but now is the time to start that, really. But at the same time, it's really important that you're able to have that time to for yourself and to help yourself and look after yourself. So I think short term it might be difficult, and I don't know how difficult it is for you at this moment in time, but it might be if we're making sure that your son understands the boundaries for short term. I mean, it's that old kind of phrase, for that short term pain, it has long term gain, because suddenly that boundary is understood and it gives you opportunity to look after yourself and take care of yourself as well, because your child understands and feels safe within that boundary.
That's great, thank you, Stephen. The next one is, how can I get the school to change the environment in class? They say they can't change because of one child, but is there a way that I can get them to understand that a changing environment will also likely help others?
That's a really good question. I don't know what kind of school your child is at. I would have those regular conversations, and I would approach it in a way where you're wanting to support the school so the school can support you as well. I think it's really important that every school understands the needs of the young person, and I think it might be that it's just a small change that's made initially. You know, it might just be a small thing that changes, but that ultimately is going to improve quality of life again within the school environment. And then you start working with the school to change other things. It is really difficult. I don't know whether the class size is 8 like it is in a lot of special schools, or I don't know whether the class size is 30 like it might be in mainstream schools. And it is really difficult to change an environment when there's that many children. But it might be that a simple change might be that your child is able to have an opportunity to leave the classroom just to work on their own, or to spend a bit of time to regulate, and then come back in and re-enter the classroom. But it's really difficult to say this is what you need to do. I would just encourage positive communication between you and your school.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen. That's actually all we've got time for today.